There is a poison that men drink willingly, a venom that paralyzes ambition before it can even draw breath. It is a word of 2 letters, a sound so simple, yet it has dismantled more empires from within than any invading army. It is the architect of mediocrity, the cage you mistake for shelter. This word is no, and your fear of it is the first and perhaps the last chain you must break if you are to command anything at all in this world. To the common man, the idealist, the one who operates from a position of hope rather than observation, the word no is a final judgment. It is a wall of bricks, suddenly and brutally erected in his path. He sees it, feels its cold finality, and he retreats. To him, the world is a series of doors that require permission to open. A no is not merely a closed door, it is a declaration that he is unworthy of passing through. This is the psychology of the servant. His self-worth is a fragile thing, gifted to him by the validation of others. When that validation is withdrawn, his world contracts. The fear of no is, therefore, the fear of his own annihilation. He believes that harmony is strength, that agreeableness is a virtue, and that to avoid conflict is to win a silent victory. He is tragically mistaken. He lives by a code that the world does not honor. As the Florentine master observed, men are ungrateful, fickle pretenders and dissemblers, avid for gain. To navigate such a world by seeking their constant approval is to volunteer for your own subjugation. Consider the man who wishes to ask for a raise. He spends weeks agonizing, rehearsing pleasantries. He frames his request not as a demand based on value, but as a humble supplication. He enters the room already defeated, his posture pleading for a yes while his spirit braces for the crushing weight of a no. When the refusal comes, and it often does, for weakness invites dismissal, he feels it not as a business decision, but as a personal indictment. The wall is built. He tells himself it is a matter of timing, of company policy, of economic climate. These are the fictions he uses to paper over the crack in his own soul. The truth is simpler. He was assessed, found wanting in conviction, and his request was denied because it was safe to do so. He has learned nothing except to fear the wall even more. He will spend the rest of his career walking in the shadow of a structure he helped to build. This is the ruin of the idealist, to believe that the world should be fair and to be perpetually wounded when it proves it is not. He confuses the world as it ought to be with the world as it is. And in that gap between idealism and reality, power is lost. Now let us discard this sentimental and ineffective philosophy. Let us adopt the lens of the prince. The prince, the true student of power, understands a fundamental truth that separates him from the masses. When he is met with the word no, he does not see a wall, he sees a mirror. This is the great conceptual leap, the foundational insight upon which an empire of the will is built. A refusal is not a verdict on his worth. It is a pure, unfiltered revelation of the person who utters it. In a world of masks, a no is a moment of profound, involuntary honesty. It is a gift of intelligence, free of charge. The prince looks into this mirror, and he does not see his own failure. He sees the truth of the other man. He sees his fears. What is he protecting by denying this request? He sees his interests. What hidden agenda does this refusal serve? He sees his limits. How much pressure can this person truly withstand? He sees his vanity. Was the no a calculated move, or a simple emotional spasm of ego? Where the servant feels the sting of rejection, the prince feels the thrill of discovery. The no is not an obstacle. It is a map. It is the beginning of the strategy, not the end of the attempt. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must know how to act as both the beast and the man. The beast does not ask for permission. It observes, it stalks, it understands the terrain, and it acts when the moment is right. The first principle of power is to see reality with unclouded eyes. And the fear of no is the most powerful cataract that can blind a man. To conquer it, one must first learn to stop internalizing it as a personal failure. You must perform a kind of surgery on your own mind, separating your ego from your objective. The objective is the territory to be conquered. Your ego is a treacherous and easily wounded advisor that must be locked in a cage. When you hear no, you do not allow your ego to scream in protest. You allow your intellect to lean forward, to listen intently, to analyze the reflection in the mirror. You have been given the key to the other man's mind. The servant sees the lock on the door. The prince sees the key in his hand. This transformation from wall to mirror is the difference between being a piece on the board and being a player of the game. It is the first and most crucial lesson in learning how to not be good in a world that is seldom so. For the love of a yes is a bond of obligation, which men, being wicked, break whenever it is to their advantage to do so. But the information gleaned from a no is held by a fear of your own insight which never fails you. For the servant is imprisoned by the reflection of his own fear, while the prince is empowered by the reflection of another's. Comment: information is power to acknowledge this truth. Subscribe, and in our next lesson, we will begin to forge the very instruments that turn this knowledge into dominion. You have now learned to see the world not as it presents itself to the timid, but as it truly is, a theater of competing wills. You have exchanged the servant's wall for the prince's mirror. You possess the intelligence, the raw data that a no provides. But information by itself is inert. It is like ore ripped from the earth, unrefined, possessing only potential. To command your world, you must become a smith. You must build a forge within your own mind and begin to hammer this raw knowledge into instruments of influence, weapons of the will. The first instrument is not for your opponent, but for yourself. For the most dangerous enemy, the most treacherous conspirator against your rise is not outside the castle walls. It resides within you. This inner traitor is the part of you that craves validation. It is the ghost that flinches at disapproval, the fragile sovereign of your self-esteem that rules with a whim of iron. Machiavelli speaks of the necessity of cruelty, well used, to secure the state. He advises a ruler to commit all necessary injuries at once, so that they may be done with quickly and breed less resentment than 1,000 smaller cuts. The novice, reading this, imagines a purge of external rivals. The master understands the first purge must always be internal. You must apply this principle of decisive cruelty to the weakest part of your own character, your ego's insatiable hunger to be liked, to be approved of, to be given a yes. This is the most profound act of self-mastery. It is a calculated, strategic act of violence against your own weakness. You must take that part of you that fears rejection, that internal courtier that whispers pleas for acceptance into your ear, and you must execute it. Not slowly, not with hesitation, but with a single swift stroke. This is not a call for self-loathing, it is a call for surgical precision. It is the recognition that your emotional response to a no is a liability your ambition cannot afford. When you face rejection, you must consciously feel the wound to your vanity, acknowledge its existence, and then refuse to grant it power. You must cauterize the injury with the cold fire of your objective. The mission, the securing of the state, the closing of the deal, the winning of the argument, is the only thing that matters. Your feelings are irrelevant. This internal act of cruelty is the foundation of true autonomy. It is the moment you declare your independence from the opinion of others. You stop being a ship tossed on the waves of their approval and become the navigator, observing the winds and tides of their moods as mere data points to be factored into your journey. This singular, brutal act of self-discipline, once performed, liberates you from a lifetime of hesitation. You will no longer dilute your requests, soften your demands, or retreat from your position out of fear of causing offense. You will act, and you will let the world react as it will, secure in the knowledge that its reaction is merely more information to be fed into your strategy. The second instrument is forged from a finer, more paradoxical metal. Once you have mastered your internal state, once the mirror of no longer rattles you, you can begin to manipulate the external world with an almost supernatural grace. The common man, when denied, has only a few predictable responses. He retreats in shame, he argues with impotent frustration, or he grows resentful. The prince does none of these things. He does the one thing his opponent can never anticipate. He displays calculated generosity. After being refused, after his will has been explicitly opposed, he offers a gift. This is not the pleading gift of a supplicant trying to buy favor. It is the magnanimous gesture of a superior power, unbothered by a trivial obstacle. Remember the Florentines' counsel. Injuries should be inflicted all at once. but benefits should be bestowed little by little, that they may be better savored. An unexpected benefit, delivered in the immediate aftermath of a conflict, is the most potent of all. Consider this. You have made your demand, and the door has been shut in your face. The person opposite you is now braced for the consequences, your anger, your disappointment. Instead, you offer a calm smile. You thank them for their candor. Then, you pivot. You offer them something of value, completely unrelated to your original request, a piece of useful intelligence, an introduction to a valuable contact, a simple compliment on their own strategic acumen in denying you. This act is a profound disruption of the psychological script of confrontation. It accomplishes several things at once. First, it disarms them completely. Their defensive posture becomes redundant. Second, it reframes your status. You are not a petitioner who has been defeated. You are a peer or even a patron who can afford to be gracious. Third, and most importantly, it creates a subtle but powerful psychological debt. The universal law of reciprocity is now engaged, but in your favor. They have taken something from you, the yes you wanted, but you have now freely given them something in return. Their mind unconsciously will seek to balance this ledger. This calculated generosity is the art of planting a seed in hostile soil. You are not just managing a single transaction, you are cultivating a long-term relationship dynamic where you hold the psychological high ground. The next time you approach them, they will not remember you as the person they defeated, but as the person who showed them strength and magnanimity in the face of their opposition. Their resolve to say no a second time will be significantly weaker. They are now subtly in your debt. You have turned the barren ground of their refusal into a fertile field for your future ambitions. These are the instruments forged in the prince's mind. The internal scalpel to excise the tumor of the ego, and the external offering that turns an adversary into a future asset. With these tools, you no longer simply react to a no. You begin to orchestrate the conditions for an eventual inevitable yes. You have now performed the vital internal surgery, excising the ego that bleeds at the touch of denial. You have forged the paradoxical instrument of calculated generosity, turning the friction of refusal into a future obligation. But the prince does not only act, he performs. For power is not merely a matter of private resolve and backroom maneuver. It is in large part a public spectacle. Men, as the Florentine sage noted, judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Therefore, the most potent weapon in your arsenal is the one that shapes this perception. It is the mastery of the great theater of human affairs, and in this theater, when faced with the drama of rejection, your role is to project an unassailable and terrifying calm. This is the art of the mask of indifference. When another person delivers a no, they are not just communicating a decision, they are making a bid for dominance. They are asserting their will over yours. They are exercising their power to obstruct, to deny, to halt your momentum. In this moment, they expect a reaction. They anticipate frustration, anger, pleading, or disappointment. Each of these reactions is a form of tribute. It is an acknowledgement that their no has landed, that their arrow has found its mark. Your emotional response validates their power. The mask of indifference is a refusal to pay this tribute. It is a strategic and chilling denial of their impact. When the refusal is issued, you do not allow your expression to shift. Your posture remains relaxed, your gaze steady. There is no flicker of irritation, no slump of defeat. Instead, you project a serene and thoughtful detachment, as though you are observing an interesting but ultimately inconsequential move in a game whose outcome you have already foreseen. This performance of imperturbability is a devastatingly effective psychological weapon. It short-circuits the entire power dynamic of the encounter. Their attempt to assert control has been met not with resistance, which would honor their strength, but with an almost complete lack of recognition. Your indifference communicates a message far more powerful than any argument. Your decision is noted, but it is not significant. My plans are larger and more complex than this single interaction, and your refusal is a minor variable in an equation you cannot even comprehend, not the decisive factor you believe it to be. This shatters their sense of agency. They intended to build a wall in your path, but you have acted as though you are a river, simply flowing around the new stone without a change in course or speed. The power they sought to demonstrate has vanished into the void of your composure. This is the essence of wielding appearances as a tool. You create a perception of depth and resilience so profound that the other person begins to doubt the efficacy of their own will when set against yours. This is not a single act, but a cultivated practice. And when practiced consistently, this spectacle of indifference begins to coalesce into something far more permanent and formidable, a reputation for inevitability. Reputation is the ghost that enters the room before you do. It is the sum of all past perceptions, a silent herald that shapes the expectations and resolve of those you are about to encounter. While the common man strives for a reputation of being agreeable or cooperative, the prince cultivates something far more useful, a reputation for being an unstoppable force. Every time you meet a no with placid indifference and proceed, undeterred, toward your goal through an alternate route, you are adding another brick to the edifice of this reputation. People observe, they talk. The word spreads that your advance is not contingent on their permission. Your will has its own gravity, its own momentum. Soon, a fundamental shift occurs in how people approach you. The very thought of denying your request becomes a more daunting proposition. They begin to ask themselves not, "Do I agree with this?" but, "What is the cost of standing in this person's way?" They have seen others try and fail, not because you crushed them with overt force, but because their opposition simply did not seem to matter. Saying no to you begins to feel like a futile and potentially foolish gesture. It is like trying to halt a tide with a bucket. This is the pinnacle of strategic influence, to make the desired outcome seem like a natural and unavoidable conclusion. You are no longer winning individual battles over yes or no. You are shaping the entire strategic landscape so that the path of least resistance for others is the path you have already chosen. They begin to grant you their yes, not out of a change of heart, but out of a pragmatic surrender to a force they perceive as inevitable. They align themselves with you because it is wiser to ride the wave than to be broken by it. The prince's ultimate victory is not to be loved, nor even to be feared in a visceral sense, but for his success to be seen as a foregone conclusion. Your reputation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the silent theater of power, the most commanding performance is the one that convinces the world that your triumph was and always will be a matter of destiny. You have learned to see the truth in the mirror of refusal, to forge instruments of influence from discipline and paradox, and to command the theater of perception with chilling indifference. You have built a reputation that precedes you, a specter of inevitability that softens the ground before you even arrive. Now, before we reveal the final architecture of command, ensure you are subscribed. For the ultimate wisdom is not for the passive observer, but for the one preparing to act, to build, to reign. This final lesson is the master stroke, the technique that moves beyond conquering the fear of no and begins the work of making it obsolete. It is the science of re-engineering consent itself. The master strategist, the true prince, understands that a direct assault on an entrenched will is crude and often ineffective. To argue against a no is to reinforce it. You give your opponent a position to defend, a hill upon which to plant their flag of defiance. The final gambit is therefore one of supreme elegance and misdirection. You do not attack the person, nor do you attack their decision. You perform a feat of psychological surgery. You meticulously isolate the objection from the individual who holds it, and then you extinguish the objection as though it were a separate, third-party problem. You do not wage a war of wills. You redefine the nature of the terrain until your will is the only logical path forward. Imagine you are facing your opponent. The no has been spoken. It hangs in the air, a declaration of their power. The amateur pleads or argues. The prince, however, accepts. And then he begins the dissection. First, you validate the person while invalidating their stance's finality. You will say something to the effect of, "I understand and I respect your position completely. Your perspective is valuable." This is not a concession. It is a disarming maneuver. You are caressing the ego of your opponent, lowering their guard, and subtly communicating that you are not their adversary. You are a reasonable collaborator in search of a solution. Then, you perform the crucial act of reframing. You distill their entire emotionally charged refusal down to a single logistical impersonal obstacle. You will say, "It seems then that the only thing preventing our progress is this one specific factor, this budgetary constraint, this timing issue, this concern over resources." Notice the language. It is no longer their will against your will. It is now both of you, as rational actors, looking at an abstract external problem. You have taken the no out of their mouth and placed it on the table between you, turning it from a verdict into a puzzle. This is the moment of the gambit. Having isolated the objection, you pivot and invite them to help you destroy it. You will ask, putting our positions aside for a moment, if we as creative thinkers could find an elegant way to neutralize that specific factor, would we then have a clear and logical path forward? This question is the crowbar that pries open the closed door. It is almost impossible to answer dishonestly. If they say no again, they reveal that their initial objection was a lie, a mere pretext, exposing themselves as an irrational actor and losing all credibility. If they say yes, and they almost always must to preserve their own image of being rational, they have just unknowingly committed to your cause. You have transformed them from an adversary into a reluctant consultant on their own defeat. They are now mentally engaged in solving the very problem that formed their only defense. From this point forward, the battle is won. The rest is mere procedure. You can now work with them, brainstorming solutions to the external problem, all of which will, of course, lead directly back to your original proposal. This is the master stroke, to never allow a conflict to be a battle of two wills, but to always reframe it as a collaboration of two minds against a shared impediment that you yourself have defined. But true command is not about a single victory. It is about building a lasting structure of power. The true victory is the consolidation of a new state, an environment you have engineered where your agency is the primary organizing principle. Every time you successfully deploy this strategy, you are not just getting a yes. You are altering the very atmosphere around you. Your reputation for inevitability is cemented. Your associates and rivals learn that your initiatives do not die. They simply change form and find new avenues of advance. They learn that opposing you directly is a futile and exhausting exercise in defending a series of positions that you will inevitably dismantle with surgical precision. This creates the final desired condition, the echo of yes. Your new projects, your future demands, are met with a pre-existing sense of compliance. The consent you receive is no longer a fresh decision made in the moment. It is an echo of all your previous victories. It is the product of a system you have built, a climate you have created. You have established a new order, not through tyranny or force, but through superior strategy and a profound understanding of human nature. You have built a world around you where consent to your will is the path of least resistance. This is the ultimate meaning of command. It is not about silencing the word no. It is about becoming the sovereign architect of a reality in which that word struggles to find purchase, where it becomes an illogical, unproductive, and ultimately irrelevant utterance. The throne of power is not seized in a single violent act. It is built, piece by piece, from the salvaged stones of every wall that was ever placed in your way, until you have constructed a fortress of will so complete that its gates are forever open, with everyone on the inside, asking you where to go next.